what if I told you that, as a technicality, although very niche, Hollow Man is the most powerful mask in the game? Dum dum dum. Again, I wish to reiterate and really emphasize, it is very niche, and it will be very rare that you actually have a build or something to utilize its full power. However, like I said, as a technicality, it is the most powerful mask in the game, and we're going to break that down a little bit. So with damage to targets out of cover, we have Foxes, which is 8%. Weapon, we can get on LMG and shotguns, we can get 12%. And if we use the Demolitionist specialization, we can get another 5%. So the total detox we are able to get is 25%. With damage to armor, Contractors is 8%. Weapons such as shotgun, incapacitor, etc. 12%. 2-piece Walker Harris 5%, 3-piece Araldi 5%. So our total that we're able to obtain with damage to armor is 30%. Then we have the lovely damage to health. Hollow Man 10%, ARs 21%, 3-piece Walker Harris 5%. Total 36%. So as I've previously discussed in other videos, that you can kind of think of DTA, DTH and DTOC as kind of your elements. They only really apply under certain conditions, and it's only when a certain enemy meets those conditions are they weak to those elements. If they have armor, they're subject to damage to armor. If they have health, they are subject to damage to health. If they're out of cover with armor, they're subject to damage to armor times damage to targets out of cover, and likewise the same for health. Which also brings us to this point. Now, as we know, DTA and DTH cannot occupy the same space, so if they are out of cover, we essentially get 1.3 times 1.25 for your armoured enemies. This gives 1.625, which is a 62.5% increase in your damage against armoured out of covered enemies. With Chungas, however, we get 1.36 times 1.25, which is 1.7, so that's a 70% increase in your damage, pretty much permanently. And the reason I say that is because with armoured targets, they like taking cover, so you might get the 62.5 or you might just get 30%, depending on whether they're in or out of cover. Chungas are always out of cover, as are Warhounds. Again though, this is pretty much why it is niche. Roughly about, I'd say 90% a guesstimate of the enemies that you will face in open world, running around doing crazy stuff, are going to be armoured enemies. There are some, as you can see that LMG gunner there, he had an armour plated helmet. Damage to health will apply to that, it will help with that. But the majority of the time, they have armour. It's very rare, well I wouldn't say very rare, but it's not as common for you to come across a Chunga or a Warhound. So despite the fact that Hollow Man as a technicality is the most powerful mask in the game, it's very rare that you would actually even get to be able to utilize it to its full capacity. Just to try and cement this point a little bit more, even if we take sort of gear pieces that give us our 3 elements just at base value, we have Foxes, which is 8% damage to targets out of cover, Contractors, which is 8% damage to armor, Hollow Man, 10% damage to health. Now, there is a weird, wacky, crazy build that you can make that utilizes some hefty multipliers in order for you to essentially overbalance your damage. Most builds nowadays, depending on where you get them from or how you wish to build, you will do exorbitant, amazing amounts of damage against armored enemies, but the moment you hit like a health enemy, your damage disappears. Or you might do absolutely amazing damage to a health enemy, but the moment you hit something that's armored, your damage disappears. There is, as far as I can figure out, one build in the game that is pretty equivalent to most high-end meta DPS builds. So we're not going to things like strikers, I'm talking about like the 3-piece Providence, Contractors, Foxes, a Grupo piece. There is one build that you can make that isn't those, so I suppose you could argue it's very off meta, but utilizes so many different multipliers that your overall output across the board, regardless of the enemy you're fighting, actually is insane. Now that build actually looks something along the lines of this. It's up to you where you'd want to put some of the pieces, however this is where I would recommend. Foxes, Contractors, roll to crit damage, Hollow Man. The fun part here is going to be get one that already comes with crit on it, so you can roll the core red. This also probably makes it one of the rarest, if not the rarest item in the game. 2-piece Walker Harris for your 5% damage to armor and 5% weapon damage, and we're also going to roll in another Jarl piece on the holster. Again, this is going to need to come with crit chance, crit damage, so you can change the armor core to weapon damage. This would give you, combined with Walker Harris, a grand total of an extra 10% weapon damage, so even without expertise, you are at 110% all weapon damage, 13% damage to armor, 18% damage to targets out of cover, and 31% damage to health. Now, the one downside to this setup is that to keep it as stable as possible, you are only at 50% crit chance. However, shot for shot, it pretty much does wondrous kinky things, and it's a little bit bonkers. Crit side, it doesn't actually do a lot, but it makes up for it in its non-crit damage, utilizing all of the multipliers, and it is directly comparable to sort of like the 3-piece Providence high-end DPS builds, as well as CGF or CFG, Chestgut, Fenris, Grupo, however you want to word it. And it's a build that I've been farming for roughly over a year now. I can't get a Hollow Man with crit on it, and every time I mention that, someone always goes, I've already got one, and then sends me a screenshot to rub it in. I'm constantly farming Jarl pieces, especially when they appear in the White House vendor or Clan vendor. I'm always buying them just to make more Jarl pieces so I can make my Jarl holster. But this to me is like the ultimate sexy build. It's like a mathematically perfect build, and I really want it. I need it in my life. Anyway, I compared my little dream build against just your standard 3-piece Providence, Grupo, Contractors, Foxes, and this is the spreadsheet for it. I mean, we're like over 8 minutes in and we're only just putting the spreadsheet in. Jesus Christ, sub me out. I should be fired. All the multipliers are there. I only get like 134% critical hit damage on my dream build. I'm at 50% crit chance, but headshots all there, etc, etc. And if we then just look at the DPS, we can see that my multiplier build, my dream build, on body crit, I'm hitting 220966. But with the standard DPS build on body crit, I'm hitting 202389, and the trend continues on the non-crits. The difference being that my body crit would be 517061, whereas the standard DPS build is 548475. Weirdly, the power of this build is in the non-crits because it's got more multipliers backing that damage and not a lot of crit damage, whereas the standard build, for example, it's got like 171 critical hit damage and 90% headshot damage, whereas my dream build has 134 critical hit damage and 75 headshot damage. So it is really lacking in the crit and headshot department. But in terms of DPS, I mean, it's not the greatest, but it performs admirably. It is doing very well in terms of output, and in multipliers your DPS is completely stable, although it doesn't directly compare to the standard builds. It's always slightly above, such as the standard build against armor on headshots, it will do 10.7% more DPS. Armor on body shots is 2.86%, and then on health it will do 7% more, and then health body shots 7.39% more. However, there is one huge thing to actually note. I'm actually missing 10% crit chance. So let's just imagine by some miracle that I can magic in another 10% crit chance. I don't know, maybe someone's running coyotes for me. So hopefully you will notice that the actual damage numbers haven't changed. All that's changed is the crit ratios. And we've closed the gap to be within like near enough 5% across the board. And on some instances, such as the body shots to health, such as this would be a Chunga, I'm now doing more damage than the standard DPS build. I need this build in my life. I really do. It just seems like a fun variable way to play. Anyway, the power of Hollow Man. Technically, although very niche, you'll hardly ever need it or use it, but as a weird, wacky technicality, Hollow Man is the most powerful mask in the game. Depending on how you want to look at it as well. I mean, Coyotes is pretty damn powerful, however, for just straight up buff and overall performance in what it's able to do, and then adding in the area in which it is able to perform that, i.e. Chungas and Warhounds, I would argue they are the largest threat in your standard play in the game. Being able to hit 36% non-conditional, because essentially they're just pure health, although damage to health is a conditional multiplier. Against the Chunga it's not, it's just here, take more damage. They're always out of cover as well, so that's an extra 70%, timesing it by damage to targets out of cover. Yeah. Hollow Man BOP, depending on how you want to use it. Anyway, that just about does it for this video. Have fun, good luck, don't die. It's bad for the health.